Autobalance is something everyone in the TF2 community has an opinion about. In simple terms, Autobalance is a system in a lot of TF2 games that, if any team has 2 or more less players than the other team, a member of the team with a higher player count gets swapped over to the other, balancing them automatically. I won't go into a complete history, but the previous implementations of this system are something we can study to come to a conclusion. Originally, Autobalance worked exactly as I just described, immediately swapping someone from one team to another with little delay. This is how the system was for a while, but everything changed when the Meet Your Match update came out and completely revamped the way the game was played, Autobalance included. Well, actually it removed Autobalance entirely. I assume only because that Valve intended for the new matchmaking system to automatically fill in any imbalances on its own, without any in-game rebalancing required, but due to a countless number of issues with the matchmaking system, this didn't work. Later that year, Autobalance was added back into the game, but instead of swapping any player automatically, members of the team with more players were asked if they'd be willing to be auto-balanced, and compensated with more casual XP. If no one wanted to, however, the teams would remain imbalanced. This was eventually changed in the Blue Moon update, where if no one wanted to be balanced, the game would force one player to swap anyway. This system of volunteering to be auto-balanced is something I actually like a lot, but I'll explain more on it later. Finally, in May of 2018, we got the version of Autobalance that we have today, being nearly identical to the original implementation, choosing players nearly at random and giving them no choice in the matter. With the history out of the way, there's a few more things I'd like to bring up from some specific implementations of the system. Mechanically speaking, the first version of Autobalance is nearly identical to the one we have today, but with the important distinction that, prior to Meet Your Match, players were free to swap between teams at any time, provided things didn't get unbalanced. This caused loads of issues in which good players would all join the same team together, so they'd have the highest chances of winning. For me though, I actually liked this system because I could choose to join the losing team at any time, and this wasn't to be a great person or increase my karma or whatever, but rather because I think that steamrolling is infinitely more boring than being steamrolled. Despite that though, I do think the modern system of locking players to each team makes more sense, to make sure that no intentional player stacking takes place. As for when Autobalance was entirely removed, it was a horrible idea, but I think it's important that it happened. It taught everyone that, despite how much it sucks to get auto-balanced, it's a necessary evil that prevents games from consistently getting one-sided. I even have a screenshot uploaded of an actual 1 vs 11 game, in which no players would ever be able to join my side. Just to move things along, we'll move on to the system that we have today. When one team has 2 or more players than the other, players on the team with a higher head count are seemingly chosen at random, and notified that, within a few seconds, they'll be auto-balanced to the other team if the teams don't become balanced before then. There are so many issues with this approach that I actually can't cover it all at once, so instead I'll approach it in sections, listing the issue and how I think it can be fixed. First and foremost, players and parties should always be bottom priority for being auto-balanced. I've had so many games with my friends completely ruined because when you're queuing with a few people, it's very likely that in almost every game, one of you gets swapped to the enemy team. And that's no fun when it happens so often, and it results in just one person in the group having an entirely different experience than the rest of us. Because of this, as I just mentioned, I think anyone in a party should automatically have some sort of resistance to auto-balance. If there is no choice though, then it should happen for the sake of the game of course, but I think this is one of the easier and more important fixes to add before anything else. Next up, regardless of parties, the player chosen to be balanced is almost entirely random. Sometimes, a team's top player with 3 times the amount of points than anyone else on his team gets balanced, and other times, John.Garcia68 who just installed the game gets chosen. There's absolutely no rules, and I really do think that there should be at least a few things taken into consideration when the system chooses a victim. For one, players who have more time playing on a team should have a smaller chance of being balanced, and I think this is one that almost everyone can get behind. It's one thing to get auto-balanced after just 1 or 2 lives, sometimes even just a few seconds after joining a game. When this happens, I don't mind at all personally. The real thing that gives auto-balance its horrible stigma, however, is when a player who's given life and limb for their team gets balanced after pushing the cart tirelessly for the last 20 minutes. Nobody likes that. Now, of course, I have no idea what the best way of judging who has put more effort into a game than anyone else, but I think we can all agree that something along these lines would drastically help things. Those 2 issues are clearly things that need to be solved, but my final proposal is instead the reintroduction of a system that's since been removed. The ability to volunteer to be prioritized for auto-balance. I'm not saying this just because I'm trying to seem like a saint or a great person, but I really do mean it when I say that I'm often perfectly happy joining the losing team at almost any point in the round. I just want to have a good game. and I think there should be a system in place for people with that mindset to help balance the game when need be. The original volunteer system is pretty solid, I think, but a better one that I suggest is some sort of checkbox in the matchmaking settings that, when checked, makes it so that if an autobalance is ever necessary in a game you're in, you'll get prioritized over all others, and an experience bonus on top of that would be a nice touch. The biggest issue autobalance has is that it frustrates players who don't want to get balanced against their will. This idea, however, will do a lot to negate that problem. People who would rather stick to one team the whole game get to do so without the fear of getting balanced out of nowhere. And those who are perfectly fine with getting balanced in the middle of a game get to help those people out, making the casual gameplay experience just a little bit more enjoyable for everyone involved. Obviously, this isn't every possible solution, but I think implementing these 3 things would solve a majority of issues that autobalancing presents. If you have some of your own ideas though, feel free to put them down in the comments. I'm happy to read them, since I'm sure there's loads more solutions to this age-old issue. Casual mode as a whole has a lot of questionable design decisions at the moment, and I do plan on covering them at a later time, but I think autobalance is a particularly interesting case, in which it's such an old issue that's plagued the game for so long, yet it seems like there's only a few things we need to do to almost entirely fix it. Then again though, I'm not Valve, and it's entirely possible that these ideas are full of tiny little holes that I just haven't spotted, and again, if there are holes then feel free to comment below. And I almost want to think that if after all these years they haven't found a better way to implement the system, there's a better reason for it rather than just a lack of attention. But at the same time, Valve is the same company who continues to allow random bullet spread to exist, so who knows.